Personnel Policy Operations. Recovery for America Now Foundation.
Now, on this, when you just when you hear that there's this many people, quote unquote, involved, the expectation, again, the expectation, never judge a book by its cover. The expectation is that it's well written by persons that have done detailed research that they're going to present that you can stand on, right? So you can walk away either way and research, look up specific things, and you can, and it's reputable um, individuals that have worked on the research, collecting, how you collect the research, these kind of things. So let's hear it.
Foundation. 1792 Exchange. Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. Texas Public Policy Foundation. Eneo Network. Young America's Foundation.
Now, let's keep in mind what happened during the Reagan era, the crack epidemic, Ali North, um, the what is it? The was it the Iran Contra? Hold on, what is it? It was cocaine for weapons, right? And the U.S. government at that time didn't want to be known to be trading weapons, sending weapons somewhere, so they had a triangular agreement with Reagan, and basically the streets got flooded with crack cocaine. The CIA apparently under Reagan at that time and other members, Ali North, were involved in trafficking cocaine into the United States. So they're saying right here they started with Reagan. You see, Reagan was on the same page. That's just what they say. Reagan was on the same page. So let's just keep listening. I mean, just from the beginning, you already know the 1980s and Reagan, those were not easy times. Those were not easy times. That's literally the crack epidemic. And Ali North, it was even a big scandal. Let me just stop right here for a second and refer to one other thing. Let's see here. YouTube, right? Ali, Ali, is it Ali with a North, right? Let's see here. Ali North Trial, congressional trial, isn't that it? Trial. Let's see here. Let's see if it comes up. War on drugs exposed complex fraud in congressional hearing. Okay, but this was the big story. And here we go. This was the big story in 1980s, but let me find the one with, let me make sure. Oliver, oh, right, I'm sorry. It's Oliver North. Okay, here we go. So let me let you know when they say Reagan right here, in the winter of 1980, the fledgling Heritage Foundation handed to President elect Ronald Reagan the inaugural mandate for leadership. The collective work by conservatives. Am I on? Okay. Yeah, there we go. I just wanted to make sure the mic was on. Collective work by conservative thought leaders and former government hands, most of whom were not part of the heritage, set out policy prescription agency by agency for the incoming president. Okay, so let me go back here. It says Ronald Reagan. Let me control F. Page. Did that come up here? Can I control F this document? Control F? Is it here? And page? Oh, let me bring this back a little bit. I see it's not showing up, so I got to pull it out a little. So control F, page, right? Oh, hold on for a second. Okay, well, let me bring it back a little bit. I'm gonna play that over, but 2 seconds. First, I'm going to bring up this, since they mentioned Reagan. I am going to bring this one up to remind people what was going on with Reagan at that time. This was the big scandal. So let's take a listen.
My name is Oliver North, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps. My best friend is my wife, Betsy, to whom I have been married for 19 years and with whom I have had 4 wonderful children, aged 18, 16, 11, and 6.
And the big scandal was trying to find out who was responsible for bringing in the cocaine for the CIA on these airplanes from South America in exchange for weapons, who organized it, right? And so this was the hearing to find that out, right? And Oliver North was one of the pilots. This is under Reagan.
I came to the National Security Council 6 years ago to work in the administration of a great president. As a staff member, I came to understand his goals and his desires. I admired his policies, his strength, and his ability to bring our country together. I observed the president to be a leader who cared deeply about people and who believed that the interests of our country were advanced by recognizing that ours is a nation at risk in a dangerous world and acting accordingly. He tried and, in my opinion, succeeded in advancing the cause of world peace by strengthening our country, by acting to restore and sustain democracy throughout the world, and by having the courage to take decisive action when needed. I also believe that we must guard against a rather perverse side of American life, and that is the tendency to launch vicious attacks and criticism against our elected officials. President Reagan has made enormous contributions, and he deserves our respect and admiration. The National Security Council is, in essence, the president's staff. It helps to formulate and coordinate national security policy. Some, perhaps on this committee, believe that the NSC was devoid of experienced leadership. I believe that is wrong. While at the NSC, I worked most closely with 3 people: Mr. Robert C. McFarlane, Admiral John Poindexter, and CIA Director William Casey. Bud McFarland is a man who devoted nearly 30 years of his life to public service in a number of responsible positions. At the NSC, he worked long hours, made great contributions, and I admire him for those efforts. Admiral Poindexter is a distinguished naval officer who served in a number of important positions of responsibility. He too was a tireless worker with a similar record of public service, and I too admire him greatly. William Casey was a renowned lawyer, a war veteran of heroic proportions, and a former chairman of the SEC. I understood that he was also a close personal friend and advisor to President Reagan. There is nearly a century of combined public service by these three men. As a member of the NSC staff, I knew that I held a position of responsibility, but I knew full well what my position was. I did not engage in fantasy that I was the president or vice president or cabinet.
Right. So you can see the Heritage Foundation, they first introduced policy or attempted to during the Ronald Reagan administration. And what was going on during the Ronald Reagan administration? Oliver North, the Iran-Contra scandal, smuggling crack cocaine or cocaine, smuggling cocaine to be made into crack and flood the streets of America. Yes, that's real. That's real. And that was under Ronald Reagan. And Ollie North was one of the pilots that was flying the stuff on the plane. Now, the hearing was to find out who was responsible. I don't know if anyone ever took responsibility, but it was admitted that the CIA was involved with smuggling crack cocaine in exchange for weapons through a triangular trade between Iran to South America, one of these South American countries. They got the weapons. The cocaine would then go out to the United States of America, be converted, sold and converted thereon to powder and crack cocaine to hit the streets of America. And the money would also go back, right? So they didn't want a trail. The United States didn't want a trail at that time, or the persons inside doing this crime did not want a trail. So that's how they did it, a triangular, right? So they didn't have their hands directly involved. So that's who the Heritage Foundation linked up with. Here they are. Look, let's go back to their document. This is what they say. They linked up with Ronald Reagan in 1980. The winter of 1980. Look at this. This collective work by conservative thought leaders and former government hands, most of whom were not part of Heritage, set out policy prescription agency by agency for the incoming president. The book literally put the conservative movement and Ronald Reagan on the same page. So let's just go back and we let it play from there just to give you a little reference. I will put the Oliver North thing in there. So we start back over.
Independent Women's Forum. Institute. 12. 13. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project. Note on Project 2025. We want you. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project is the conservative movement's unified effort to be ready for the next conservative administration to govern at 12 o'clock noon, January. Want you. The 2025 presidential
Yeah, I just wanted to
transition
get it queued
project
up
is the
properly, so now
conservative
you can
movement's
read it
unified
also
effort
if you
to be
can't
ready
hear it.
for the next conservative administration to govern at 12. Administration a success. History teaches that a president's power to implement an agenda is at its apex during the administration's opening.
And just because I'm bothering to read it does not mean I'm a part of it. I'm against it.
Opening days. To execute requires a well-conceived, coordinated, and restore our republic to its original moorings is too great for any one conservative policy shop to spearhead.
Now you see, they make a claim that the federal government is weaponized against American citizens and conservative values, with the freedom and liberty under siege as never before. Okay, but let's just remind people of what is he talking about? The federal government. Um, this is the weapon used to pop a cap in Donald Trump. This is the weapon. This weapon has been, and weapons like it have been heavily contested by the federal government. This this shooting happened in a what do they call it? Something carry, open carry state, and you do not actually. I don't believe you even need a license necessarily to have this weapon, but you need to buy it legally under the federal guidelines. Now, the person who shot Donald Trump, he didn't violate any of those guidelines. So this is the conservative guidelines that he was shot under. The weapon was possessed under the conservative guidelines, not it's not the Biden guidelines. It's just what you could get the gun advocates to accept at the bare minimum. Now, yeah, it was a Republican that shot Donald Trump. So again, they're imagining being under attack, but they don't see these weapons as being part of the attack, when it's their policies primarily that this shooting could really happen under. The person who shot him could possess this weapon legally and took a shot at another Republican. Now, when has there been another time where a Democrat has taken a shot at a Republican president or at Donald Trump? When has that happened before? You see, But there's been loads of shootings with these weapons. Under Donald Trump, mass shootings were up, not down. They were up from the last administration, and they've calmed down and gone down after Donald Trump. So they have gone up. Exactly why? Can it be blamed only on Donald Trump? Well, it depends on who you are. But he didn't seem to advocate for a limiting of these weapons, that mass shooters, or a change in the laws. He just basically washed his hands of it. So again, guns are part of the political dialogue in the United States, and Donald Trump was attacked by it. It wasn't the federal government who did it. It's basically lingering policies that he played also a role in himself, in protecting and demonizing. If you want to take away the right for people to have open and carry, to possess a weapon like this without even a license, right? Criticize that law. Okay, so let's continue.
Spearhead. It requires the collective action of our movement. With the quickening approach of January 2020, for cutting bureaucracy and reducing spending by billions of dollars. He was a professor at the University of Maryland and Bellevue University and is a columnist and author of 10 books, including his recent The Enduring Tension. Diana Furcht-Gottroth, an Oxford-educated economist, directs the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at the Heritage Foundation and is adjunct professor of economics at George Washington University. Diana served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where she directed the department's $1.2 billion research budget. The 17. Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. Office of Positioning, Navigation and Timing and Spectrum Management, and the University Transportation Center Program. Diana worked in senior roles in the White House under Presidents Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, where she was Chief of Staff of the Council of Economic Advisers. Thomas F. Gilman served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Administration and Chief Financial Officer of the U.S. Department of Commerce in the Trump administration. Currently, he is a Director of ACLJ Action and Chairman of Torngat Metals. Tom is the former CEO of Chrysler Financial and has had a 40-plus year career as a senior executive and entrepreneur in the
Okay, I'm going to pause this and move it forward so we can get to the gist of it, because now they're just talking about who has worked on it, who has written it, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. So let me see here. Let me go through the chapters. 2 seconds. How do I see where the chapters are in this daggone thing? Author's note. Okay, keep going. Author's note. Okay. So it starts right about here. 72. Page 72. Daggone, did we go that far? Overview. Here we go. We started the overview.
69. 3. Central Personnel Agencies, Managing the Bureaucracy. Donald Devine, Dennis Dean Kirk, and Paul Dans. Overview. From the very first mandate for leadership, the personnel is policy theme has been the fundamental principle guiding the government's personnel management. As the U.S. Constitution makes clear, the President's appointment, direction, and removal authorities are the central elements of his executive power. Point 1. In implementing that power, the people and the President deserve the most talented and responsible workforce possible. Who the President assigns to design and implement his political policy agenda will determine whether he can carry out the responsibility given to him by the American people. The President must recognize that whoever holds a government position sets its policy. To fulfill an electoral mandate, he must therefore give personnel management his highest priority, including cabinet-level precedence. The federal government's immense bureaucracy spreads into hundreds of agencies and thousands of units and is centered and overseen at the top by key central personnel agencies and their governing laws and regulations. The major separate personnel agencies in the national government today are L. The Office of Personnel Management, OPM. L. The Merit Systems Protection Board, MSPB. L. The Federal Labor Relations Authority, FLRA, and L. The Office of Special Counsel, OSC. Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. Title 5 of the U.S. Code charges the OPM with executing, administering, and enforcing the rules, regulations, and laws governing the civil service. 2. It grants the OPM direct responsibility for activities like retirement, pay, health, training, federal unionization, suitability, and classification functions not specifically granted to other agencies by statute. The agency's director is charged with aiding the President, as the President may request, in preparing such civil service rules as the President prescribes and otherwise advising the President on actions that may be taken to promote an efficient civil service and a systematic application of the merit system principles, including recommending policies relating to the selection, promotion, transfer, performance, pay, conditions of service, tenure, and separation of employees. The MSPB is the lead adjudicator for hearing and resolving cases and controversies for 2.2 million federal employees. 3. It is required to conduct fair and neutral case adjudications, regulatory reviews, and actions and studies to improve the workforce. Its court-like adjudications investigate and hear appeals from agency actions such as furloughs, suspensions, demotions, and terminations and are appealable to the U.S. Court of Appeals. The FLRA hears appeals of agency personnel cases involving federal labor grievance procedures to provide judicial review with binding decisions appealable to appeals courts. 4. It interprets the rights and duties of agencies and employee labor organizations on management rights, OPM interpretations, recognition of labor organizations, and unfair labor practices under the general principle of bargaining in good faith and compelling need. The OSC serves as the investigator, mediator, publisher, and prosecutor before the MSPB with respect to agency and employees regarding prohibited personnel practices, Hatch Act 5 politicization, Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act 6 issues, and whistleblower complaints. 7. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, has general responsibility for reviewing charges of employee discrimination against all civil rights breaches. However, it also administers a government employee section that investigates and adjudicates federal employee complaints concerning equal employment violations as with the private sector. 8. This makes the agency an additional de facto factor in government personnel management. While not a personnel agency per se, the General Services Administration, GSA, is charged with general supervision of contracting. 9. Today, there are many more contractors in government than there are civil service employees. The GSA must therefore be a part of any personnel management discussion. Analysis and recommendations. OPM, managing the federal bureaucracy. At the very pinnacle of the modern progressive program to make government competent stands the ideal of professionalized, career civil service. Since the turn of the 20th century. 70. Central personnel agencies, managing the bureaucracy. Progressives have sought a system that could effectively select, train, reward, and guard from partisan influence the neutral scientific experts they believe are required to staff the national government and run the administrative state. Their U.S. system was initiated by the Pendleton Act of 188,310 and institutionalized by the 1930s New Deal to set principles and practices that were meant to ensure that expert merit rather than partisan favors or personal favoritism ruled within the federal bureaucracy. Yet, as public frustration with the civil service has grown, generating calls to drain the swamp, it has become clear that their project has had serious unintended consequences. The civil service was devised to replace the amateurism and presumed corruption of the old spoils system, wherein government jobs rewarded loyal partisans who might or might not have professional backgrounds. Although the system appeared to be sufficient for the nation's first century, progressive intellectuals and activists demanded a more professionalized, scientific, and politically neutral administration. Progressives designed a merit system to promote expertise and shield bureaucrats from partisan political pressure, but it soon began to insulate civil servants from accountability. The modern merit system increasingly made it almost impossible to fire all but the most incompetent civil servants.
Now, one of the things that stands out to me already in this report is that they don't cite any grievances when they're mentioning their grievances. Like, you don't have a chance to know what is it exactly this they specifically have a problem with. Give us an example. So it says here, in the 1970s, Georgia Democratic Governor Jimmy Carter, then a political unknown, ran for president, supporting the New Deals program and their great societal expansion, but opposing the way they were being administered. The policies were not actually reducing poverty, increasing prosperity, or improving the environment, he argued, and to make them work required fundamental bureaucratic reform. He correctly charged that almost all government employees were rated as successful, all received the same pay regardless of performance, and even the worst were impossible to fire. See, now, where exactly, they don't give you an example of that. They don't give you the exact order that he made, it's almost like an interpretation that one is reading. You know, I'm usually, when you're dealing with law and grievances, you cite some grievances as examples to qualify what it is you want to do. You don't cite your opinion about what happened. But in any case, let's go forward.
Servants. Complying with arcane rules regarding recruiting, rating, hiring, and firing simply replaced the goal of cultivating competence and expertise. In the 1970s, Georgia Democratic Governor Jimmy Carter, then a political unknown, ran for president supporting New Deal programs and their Great Society expansion but opposing the way they were being administered. The policies were not actually reducing poverty, increasing prosperity, or improving the environment, he argued, and to make them work required fundamental bureaucratic reform. He correctly charged that almost all government employees were rated as successful, all received the same pay regardless of performance, and even the worst were impossible to fire, and he won the presidency. President Carter fulfilled his campaign promise by hiring Syracuse University Dean Alan Campbell, who served first as chairman of the U.S. Civil Service Commission and then as director of the OPM, and helped him devise and pass the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, CSRA 11, to reset the basic structure of today's bureaucracy. A new performance appraisal system was devised with a 5 rather than 3 distribution of rating categories and individual goals more related to agency missions and more related to employee promotion for all. Pay and benefits were based directly on improved performance appraisals, including sizable bonuses for mid-level managers and senior executives. But time ran out on President Carter before the act could be fully executed, so it was left to President Ronald Reagan and his new OPM and agency leadership to implement. Overall, the new law seemed to work for a few years under Reagan, but the Carter-Reagan reforms were dissipated within a decade. Today, employee evaluation is back. 71. Mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. To pre-reform levels with almost all rated successful or above, frustrating any relation between pay and performance. An outstanding rating should be required for senior executive service, SES, chiefs to win big bonuses, but a few years ago, when it was disclosed that the Veterans Administration executives who encouraged false reporting of waiting lists for hospital admission were rated outstanding, the Senior Executive Association justified it, telling Congress that only outstanding performers would be promoted to the SES in the first place and that precise ratings were unnecessary.
Okay, again, they mention, if we go back here, they mention, what did they say here? Veterans Administration executives who encourage false reporting of waiting lists for hospital administration were rated outstanding. The Senior Executive Association justified it, telling Congress that only outstanding performers would be promoted to the SE. Okay, so what are the names of the executives? I mean, why not mention it if you're discussing, if you're making a claim that this is what they did? Why not mention who those executives are, right? I mean, I don't know. It just seems basic to me. They're government officials. You can mention them.
Unnecessary. Point 12. The Government Accountability Office, GAO, however, has reported that pay raises, within grade pay increases, and locality pay for regular employees and executives have become automatic rather than based on performance as a result of most employees being rated at similar appraisal levels. Point 13. OPM, merit hiring in a merit system. It should not be impossible even for a large national government to hire good people through merit selection. The government did so for years, but it has proven difficult in recent times to select personnel based on their knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSA, as the law dictates. Yet for the past 34 years, the U.S. Civil Service has been unable to distinguish consistently between strong and unqualified applicants for employment. As the Carter presidency was winding down, the U.S. Department of Justice and top lawyers at the OPM contrived with plaintiffs to end civil service IQ examinations because of concern about their possible impact on minorities. The OPM had used the Professional and Administrative Career Examination, PACE, General Intelligence Exam to select college graduates for top agency employment, but Carter administration officials, probably without the president's informed concurrence, abolished the PACE through a legal consent court decree capitulating to demands by civil rights petitioners who contended that it was discriminatory. The judicial decree was to last only 5 years but still controls federal hiring and is applied to all KSA tests even today.
What's really interesting is that, okay, so let's say that you need the president to be elected to appoint these people. What experience does the president need to have? Does the president need to have any experience? Law, maybe. Experience in civil society, maybe. Or is it just a businessman can do it with no experience whatsoever, right? So there's a bit of a contradiction there. But yeah, let's just keep on listening.
Today, general ability tests like the PACE have been used successfully to assess the usefulness and cost-effectiveness of broad intellectual qualities across many separate occupations. Courts have ruled that even without evidence of overt, intentional discrimination, such results might suggest discrimination. This doctrine of disparate impact could be ended legislatively or at least narrowed through the regulatory process by a future administration. In any event, the federal government has been denied the use of a rigorous entry examination for 3 decades, relying instead on self-evaluations that have forced managers to resort to subterfuge such as pre-selecting friends or associates that they believe are competent to obtain qualified employees. In 2015, President Barack Obama's OPM began to introduce an improved merit examination called USA Hire, which it had been testing quietly since 2012 in a few agencies for a dozen job descriptions. The tests had multiple choice questions with only one correct answer. Some questions even required essay replies. Questions 72. Central personnel agencies, managing the bureaucracy. That would change regularly to depress cheating. President Donald Trump's OPM planned to implement such changes but was delayed because of legal concerns over possible disparate impact. Courts have agreed to review the consent decree if the uniform guidelines on employee selection procedures setting the technical requirements for sound exams are reformed. A government that is unable to select employees based on KSA-like test qualifications cannot work, and the OPM must move forward on this very basic personnel management obligation. The centrality of performance appraisal. In the meantime, the OPM must manage the workforce it has. Before they can reward or discipline federal employees, managers must first identify who their top performers are and who is performing less than adequately.
So far, to me, this reads like an excuse for the last Trump administration appointees to different government bureaus and their activities that came under fire by Congress. I'll give you an example. The appointee to the Department of Justice, right? What was his name? He was a Trump appointee, and what was it? Barr? Yeah, exactly, Barr. His last name was Barr. Barr, in the hearings and testifying, he testified against Trump. He's made several public statements, and this was a Trump appointee. And some of the complaints were, are you like following protocol and procedure? You see, and again, what qualifications does the president have? Trump at that time. But yet They're complaining about qualifications employees, persons that are hired, personnel should have in government, not necessarily appointees. We're talking about people that work directly with the government, that are not that are federal government employees, but they're not appointees. You see, their career, so they have to follow rules, regulations, blah 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 blah, no matter what. Right? They always have that to check out, rules and regulations, not just an agenda that the president puts into play. That's part of the checks and balances, I would think. But let's keep playing it.
Adequately. In fact, as Ludwig von Mises proved in his classic Bureaucracy 14, unlike the profit and loss evaluation tool used in the private sector, government performance measurement depends totally on a functioning appraisal system. If they cannot be identified in the first place within a functioning appraisal system, it is impossible to reward good performance or correct poor performance. The problem is that the collegial atmosphere of a bureaucracy in a multifaceted appraisal system that is open to appeals makes this a very challenging ideal to implement successfully. The GAO reported more recently that overly high and widely spread performance ratings were again plaguing the government, with more than 99% of employees rated fully successful or above by their managers, a mere 0.3% rated as minimally successful, and 0.1% actually rated unacceptable. 15y. It is human nature that no one appreciates being told that he or she is less than outstanding in every way. Informing subordinates in a closely knit bureaucracy that they are not performing well is difficult. Rating compatriots is even considered rude and unprofessional. Moreover, managers can be and often are accused of racial or sexual discrimination for a poor rating, and this discourages honesty. In 2018, President Trump issued Executive Order 138-3916 requiring agencies to reduce the time for employees to improve performance before.
Hold on. What did he just say? Let me go back here. Rating compatriots is even considered rude and unprofessional. Moreover, managers can be and often are accused of racial or sexual discrimination for a poor rating, and this discourages honesty. That's a very interesting statement. I don't know what to say about that yet, but let's keep playing.
Corrective action could be taken to initiate disciplinary actions against poorly performing employees more expeditiously, to reiterate that agencies are obligated to make employees improve, to reduce the time for employees to respond to allegations of poor performance, to mandate that agencies remind supervisors of expiring employee probationary periods, to prohibit agencies from entering into settlement agreements that modify an employee's personnel record, and to reevaluate procedures for agencies to discipline supervisors who retaliate against whistleblowers. Unfortunately, the order was overturned by the Biden administration 17, so it will need to be reintroduced in 2025. The fact remains that meaningfully evaluating employees' performance is a critical part of a manager's job. In the Reagan appraisal process, managers were evaluated on how they themselves rated their subordinates. This is critical to 73. Mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. Responsibility and improved management.
That sounds like that is the strangest thing. And maybe I'm missing something, but it sounds like they don't want people to be able to make complaints about sexual harassment or racism. That's somehow improper. Am I misunderstanding something there? I don't understand it. Let me go right back really quickly and just make sure I'm not missing what they're saying here. Here we go. Okay. Here. Let's start there.
In 2018, President Trump issued Executive Order 138-3916 3916 requiring agencies to reduce the time for employees to improve performance before corrective action could be taken, to initiate disciplinary actions against poorly performing employees more expeditiously, to reiterate that agencies are obligated to make employees improve, to reduce the time for employees to respond to allegations of poor performance, to mandate that agencies remind supervisors of expiring employee probationary periods, to prohibit agencies from entering into settlement agreements that modify an employee's personnel record, and to re-evaluate procedures for agencies to discipline supervisors who retaliate against whistleblowers. Unfortunately, the order was overturned by the Biden administration 17, so it will need to be reintroduced in 2025. The fact remains that meaningfully evaluating employees' performance is a critical part of a manager's job. In the Reagan appraisal process, managers were evaluated on how they themselves rated their subordinates. This is critical to 73. Mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. Responsibility and improved management. It is essential that political executives build policy goals directly into employee appraisals, both for mission success and for employees to know what is expected. Indistinguishable from their co-workers on paper, hard-working federal employees often go unrewarded for their efforts and are often the system's greatest critics. Federal workers who are performing inadequately get neither the benefit of an honest appraisal nor clear guidance on how to improve. Political executives should take an active role in supervising performance appraisals of career staff.
It literally sounds like they're complaining about complaints. I don't know. Am I missing something there? I don't get it. I'm missing it. And again, they bring up Reagan, how Reagan did it. Well, folks should really know how Reagan did it, because Reagan also did it like this. Oliver North.
Member or even the director of the National Security Council. I was simply a staff member with a demonstrated ability to get the job done. Over time, I was made responsible for managing a number of complex and sensitive covert operations that we have discussed here to date. I reported directly to Mr. McFarland and to Admiral Poindexter. I coordinated directly with others, including Director Casey. My authority to act always flowed, I believe, from my superiors. My military training inculcated in me a strong belief in the chain of command. And so far as I can recall, I always acted on major matters with specific approval after informing my superiors of the facts as I knew them, the risks, and the potential benefits. I readily admit that I was action-oriented, that I took pride in the fact that I was counted upon as a man who got the job done. And I don't mean this by way of criticism, but there were occasions when my superiors, confronted with accomplishing goals or difficult tasks, would simply say, "Fix it, Ollie," or "Take care of it." Since graduating from the Naval Academy in 1968, I have strived to be...
Sonny, have you ever heard about the Iran-Contra scandal that happened in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan? It was a triangular agreement or trade, covert triangular trade, where, as you see, Ollie North, he's one of the pilots, but he's not the only one involved in getting weapons from Iran, I believe, to South America in exchange for them to send cocaine through the CIA into the United States of America, which would further be distributed by another CIA employee. Have you heard about that? That was under Reagan. And when I listen to them quote Reagan, and then they're quoting employees and evaluations and, often discrimination and, sexual, what do they call it? Harassment is a tool used to stop good employees. That's what it sounds like they're saying. I mean, this is what pops in my mind. Like, they mentioned earlier that the first person that was introduced to this project was Ronald Reagan, and that they had hopes that he would implement it. And, I don't know how far it went. We didn't go that far. They're obviously still in that moment if they're mentioning Reagan. But it just seems so strange what I'm listening to right now. Almost like an alternative universe or something. But here, let me just continue with this.
Staff, not unduly delegate this responsibility to senior career managers, and be willing to reward and support good performers. Merit pay. Performance appraisal means little to daily operations if it is not tied directly to real consequences for success as well as failure. According to a survey of major U.S. private companies which, unlike the federal government, also have a profit and loss evaluation, 90% use a system of merit pay for performance based on some type of appraisal system. Despite early efforts to
Okay, I must look at this. Again, I have a criticism of this. Look, merit pay performance appraised means little to daily operations if it is not tied directly to real consequences for success as well as failure. According to a survey of major U.S. private companies, what's the survey called? What is the survey called? You see how this is written? And I mentioned this before. They're claiming things without giving you a reference to what they're talking about. It's not good enough to say a survey. You know how many surveys are done every single day in the United States of America, like on specific topics. I have no clue what the survey is. So how does the reader research what they're talking about and come to their own conclusion fairly? I mean, it's almost written like, you believe me, just believe me, believe what I'm writing. I'm like, yeah, here we go. Let's just start back here. Performance, merit pay. Here we go.
institute merit pay throughout the federal government. However, compensation is still based primarily on seniority rather than merit. Merit pay for executives and managers was part of the Carter reforms and was implemented early in the Reagan presidency. Beginning in the summer of 1982, the Reagan OPM entered 18 months of negotiations with House and Senate staff on extending merit pay to the entire workforce. Long and detailed talks between the OPM and both Democrats and Republicans in Congress ensued, and a final agreement was reached in 1983 that supposedly ensured the passage of legislation creating a new performance management and recognition system, PMRS, for all, not just management, GS-13 through GS-15 employees. Meanwhile, the OPM issued regulations to expand the role of performance related to pay throughout the entire workforce, but congressional allies of the employee unions, led by Representative Steny Hoyer, D., of Government Employee Eric Maryland, stoutly resisted this extension of pay for performance.
Okay, D means Democrat. This is crazy, man.
Pay for performance and, with strong union support, appropriations process to block OPM administrative pay reforms. Bonuses for SES career employees survived, but performance appraisals became so high and widely distributed that there was little relationship between performance and remuneration. Ever since the original merit pay system for federal managers, GM-13 through GM-15 grade levels, just below the SES, was allowed to expire in September 1993, little to nothing has been done either to reinstate the federal merit pay program for managers or to distribute performance rating evaluations for the SES, much less to extend the program to the remainder of the workforce. A reform-friendly president and Congress might just provide the opportunity to create a more comprehensive performance plan. In the meantime, however, political executives should use existing pay and especially fiscal awards strategically to reward good performance to the degree allowed by law. 74. Central personnel agencies, managing the bureaucracy. Making the appeals process work. The non-military government dismissal rate is well below 1%, and no private sector industry employee enjoys the job security that a federal employee enjoys. Both safety and justice demand that managers learn to act strategically to hire good and fire poor performers legally. The initial paperwork required to separate poor or abusive performers, when they are infrequently identified, is not overwhelming, and managers might be motivated to act if it were not for the appeals and enforcement processes. Formal appeal in the private sector is mostly a rather simple two-step process, but government unions and associations have been able to convince politicians to support a multiple and extensive appeals and enforcement process. As noted, there are multiple administrative appeals bodies. The FLRA, OSC, and EEOC have relatively narrow jurisdictions. Claims that an employee's removal or disciplinary actions violate the terms of a collective bargaining agreement between an agency and a union are handled by the FLRA. Employees who claim their removal was the result of discrimination can appeal to the EEOC, and employees who believe their firing was retribution for being a whistleblower can go to the OSC. While the MSPB specializes in abuses of direct merit system issues, it can and does hear and review almost any of the matters heard by the other agencies. Cases involving race, gender, religion, age, pregnancy, disability, or national origin can be appealed to the EEOC or the MSPB, and in some cases to both and to the OSC. This gives employees multiple opportunities to prove their cases, and while the EEOC, MSPB, FLRA, and OSC may all apply essentially the same burden of proof, the odds of success may be substantially different in each forum. In fact, forum shopping among them for a friendlier venue is a common practice, but frequent filers face no consequences for frivolous complaints. As a result, meritorious cases are frequently delayed, denying relief and justice to truly aggrieved individuals. The MSPB can and does handle all such matters, but it faces a backlog of an estimated 3,000 cases of people who were potentially wrongfully terminated or disciplined as far back as 2013. From 2017 to 2022, the MSPB lacked the quorum required to decide appeals. On the other hand, as of January 2023, the EEOC had a backlog of 42,000 cases. While federal employees win appeals relatively infrequently, MSPB administrative judges have upheld agency decisions as much as 80% of the time. The real problem is the time and paperwork involved in the elaborate process that managers must undergo during appeals. This keeps even the best managers from bringing cases in all but the most egregious cases of poor performance or misconduct. As a result, the MSPB, EEOC, FLRA, and OSC likely see very few cases compared to the number of occurrences, and non-performers continue to be paid and often are placed in non-work positions. Having a choice of appeals is especially unique to the government. If lower priority issues were addressed in-house, serious adverse actions would be less subject. 75. Mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. To delay. With the proper limitation of labor union actions, the FLRA should have limited reason for appeals. The EEOC's federal employee section should be transferred to the MSPB, and many of the OCS's investigatory functions should be returned to the OPM. The MSPB could then become the main reviewer of adverse actions, greatly simplifying the burdensome appeal process. Making civil service benefits economically and administratively rational. In recent years, the combined wages and benefits of the executive branch civilian workforce totaled $300 billion according to official data. But even that amount does not properly account for billions in unfunded liability for retirement and other government reporting distortions. Official data also report employment as approximately 2 million, but this ignores approximately 20 million contractors who, while not eligible for government pay and benefits, do receive them indirectly through contracting, even if they are less generous. Official data also claim that national government employees are paid less than private sector employees are paid for similar work, but several more neutral sources demonstrate that public sector workers make more on average than their private sector counterparts. All of this extravagance deserves close scrutiny. Market-based pay and benefits. According to current law, federal workers are to be paid wages comparable to equivalent private sector workers rather than compared to all private sector employees. While the official studies claim that federal employees are underpaid relative to the private sector by 20% or more, a 2016 Heritage Foundation study found that federal employees received wages that were 22% higher than wages for similar private sector workers. If the value of employee benefits was included, The total compensation premium for federal employees over their private sector equivalents increased to between 30% and 40%. 18 The American.
Okay, stop right there. Federal employee with okay, hold on. Where did they say Heritage Foundation at? Da, 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 da. What does it say here? Did I move it up between 14? Is it here? Hold on. Did I skip it? It's up further, maybe. Here it is. While the official studies claim that federal employees are underpaid relatively to private sector by 20% or more, a 2016 Heritage Foundation study found that they don't name the actual study. They don't name the study. I'm sure the study is not called a 2016 Heritage Foundation study. See, that's what's so slick about this. And anybody that reads um serious reporting, scholarly work, knows that you actually should be naming these reports so that people can research it, so that people know what you're talking about. But here it seems like they go through great effort to make a claim without without mentioning the actual reports or the people, the specific instances that qualify what they're writing. And again, they've done it just here. This is not written well. I'm just telling you, it's not scholarly. So far, it doesn't seem scholarly to me. I'm just saying, you can mention what report it is. It's not called a 2016 Heritage Foundation study. It's not called that. That's not the name of the study.
Base salary is only one component of a federal employee's total compensation. In addition to high starting wages, federal employees normally receive an annual cost of living adjustment, available to all employees, and generous scheduled raises known as step increases. Moreover, a large proportion of federal employees are stationed in the Washington, D.C. area and other large cities and are entitled to steep locality pay enhancement to account for the high cost of living in these areas. A federal employee with 5 years experience receives 20 vacation days, 13 paid sick days, and all 10 federal holidays compared to an employee at a large private company who receives 13 days of vacation and 8 paid sick days. Federal health benefits are more comparable to those provided by Fortune 500 employers, with the government paying 72% of the weighted average premiums, but this is much higher than for most private plans. Almost half of private firms do not offer any employer contributions at all. 76. Central person.
Okay. I'm sorry. Now it's becoming clear. They want private industry and corporations to run the government because it seems like they make it a backwards argument. Just because corporations are, what did they say here? Hold on. Let me see. Let me go back. This is so funny. Look, this is a federal employee with 5 years experience receives 20 vacation days, 13 paid sick days, and all 10 federal holidays, compared to an employee at a large private company who received 13 days of vacation and 8 paid sick days. Federal health benefits are more comparable to those provided by Fortune 500 employers, with the government paying 72% of the weighted average premiums, but this is much higher than for most private plans. Almost half of the private firms do not offer any employer contribution at all. So what are you doing? Blaming the government for that? A private Almost half of private firms do not offer any employer contributions at all. No, duh. Why don't you advocate for that? That they pay more. But they want to use corporations as a way to pay less while they making trillions of dollars. Do you know private corporations how much they're making right now that are based in the United States of America? I mean, are they going broke? Uh, hmm. This is weird. Even if you're at a private company, it's still a job. It's still it still should be unionized. They should still, and this is the thing: the corporations don't want unions. These same people are fighting unions. They're fighting fair pay in the private sector. Like, what's up with this? This is like something, to me, it just sounds, maybe I'm misreading it, maybe I'm not hearing it right, but this sounds very backwards. Like, private corporations should be held under scrutiny by unions. But private corporations often don't want unions to regulate how they pay. So, how can you complain about the government paying more? How can you complain about that? Shouldn't it be that you should complain that private corporations should pay more, right? Shouldn't they pay, or at least something comparable? Shouldn't that go up instead of go down? I know people that have private contracts that work in government buildings, but instead they don't work directly for, they're not federal employees. It's somebody that got a contract, a third party contract for the federal government. Now, do you think they're paying their employees? Do you think they are? And the persons that I know that are working for those third party contracts, they complain all the time about that, but they're not complaining about the government. They're complaining about their boss making all the money and not sharing the profits with the employees. So this is really some biased. This is totally biased because at the bare minimum, why wouldn't you introduce both arguments? In any case, if there's going to be any real argument to be made at all, why don't you show both sides of it? I mean, to me, this is just like, I can't spend that much time on this today, but I'm gonna come back to this, no problem. But let me see here. This is just, federal workers have their own pay scale. Different professionals have different scales. Yep, a business makes us exactly. That's what they're doing, and I don't get how they're viewing this. They're viewing it as It almost sounds like they're viewing it as the private sector is suffering, so the government's the problem. Um, you know, they're viewing it as regulations in the government, involving sexual harassment, gender bias, racial discrimination, government problem. They want to get rid of some of the grievance periods, some of the protocols when you have these grievances. If you get fired unfairly, how can you appeal? The appeal process. They want to shorten that process. You know, to me, I don't get how anybody can listen to this and think that these people are about everyday people, everyday work. To me, it sounds like they're about corporations in a very extreme way, like very extreme. But let's go
Personnel
on.
agencies, managing the bureaucracy. The obvious solution to these discrepancies is to move closer to a market model for federal pay and benefits. One need is for a neutral agency to
They want to privatize the government, yo. This is a direct attack by corporations on the private, on the government that has regulations. I'm glad I actually bothered to read this shit because I hadn't read it. I'd only been at least listening to people talk about it. And it's 900 damn pages. So I, it's going to take some time for me to sit down and read it all. But of course, I'm going to listen to others that, maybe lawyers that have read it and do commentary on it. But, you know, reading it for yourself, it is mind boggling. It is mind boggling. Let me see. I'm going to go on for one more hour today. So I'm going to let it play. Let's go.
oversee pay hiring decisions, especially for high demand occupations. The OPM is independent of agency operations, so it can assess requirements more neutrally. For many years, with its special pay rates program, The OPM evaluated claims that federal rates in an area were too low to attract competent employees and allowed agencies to offer higher pay when needed rather than increased rates for all. Ideally, the OPM should establish an initial pay schedule for every occupation and region, monitor turnover rates and applicant to position ratios, and adjust pay and recruitment on that basis. Most of this requires legislation, but the OPM should be an advocate for a true equality of benefits between the public and private sectors. Reforming federal retirement benefits. Career civil servants enjoy retirement benefits that are nearly unheard of in the private sector. Federal employees retire earlier, normally at age 55 after 30 years, enjoy richer pension annuities, and receive automatic cost of living adjustments based on the areas in which they retire. Defined benefit federal pensions are fully indexed for inflation, a practice that is extremely rare in the private sector. A federal employee with a
But again, are they advocating for unions in the private sector? Are they advocating to raise it in the private sector? This is all they've done so far is advocate that it becomes lower pay. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. They're literally, to me, I haven't heard one mention that the private sector should lift up their standards in terms of pay, security, health insurance, retirement, these kind of things. God damn. So they haven't mentioned that one time or suggested that the private industry. Now, if you listen to, I'm just going to be honest. If you listen to Dems are constantly saying there needs to be more unions. And when they say more unions, they're talking about regulation on the private sector to raise pension, raise healthcare access, raise the security for the employee to to some comparable Western standard, a Western standard. You know, a worker is a worker. It could be that the federal government, maybe they say you retire at a certain age, but listen, some jobs, it could be federal or state, that's like that. Some state employees retire much earlier than the private sector. For example, if you're a police officer and you start at 21 years old, you're only supposed to be doing 25 years roughly as a police officer out there fighting crime, risking your life. And think about the benefits that they get. They get certain kind of benefits, right? But they're not super duper. They're not, these are like average. These are average. And you would say for the same for career government professionals in the federal government and in state. I don't get it. The only sector that hasn't been held to task regarding these things is the private sector. Pay raises, annual pay raises, even, pension. Are they even paying the private sector? Are they even obligated to pay into your pension? Are you paying all your pension? How much does your employee pay into your pension? Or are you paying most of it? You see, it's like healthcare, access to an insurance plan. Does the company have a buy-in plan that you can buy into as an employee? Or do they just not want to work with you at all on that? This is not just an attack on the government. I can see why they're attacking the government, because the government wants to regulate it. The government wants private sector to do its part for its employees. So I can see why they're attacking them. But the thing about it is that they're attacking everyday people while they're saying they're going to help everyday people. How are you going to help everyday people by lowering the pay grade? I don't get that. What does that have to do with the private sector? The private sector in the U.S. has been allowed to freely do things that you just simply won't be allowed to do in other Western nations, right? Because you do kind of have a right to security as an employee in other Western nations. In the US, you can have people working in the private sector and can't even really keep a roof over their head. You know, it's serious. Working for 20, 30 years and have no retirement plan, real retirement plan. 40, 50 years, no real retirement plan. Um, what's up with that? But all right, I'm sorry. It's just hitting me, when I'm reading this. But
Pre-retirement income of $25,000 under the older of the two federal retirement plans will receive at least $200,000 more over a 20-year period than will private sector workers with the same pre-retirement salary under historic inflation levels. During the early Reagan years, the OPM reformed many specific provisions of the federal pension program to save billions administratively. Under OPM pressure, Reagan and Congress ultimately ended the old Civil Service Retirement System, CSRS, entirely for new employees.
all right, keep in mind, right? Keep in mind, right? Who got a raise under Trump in the federal government? Who got a raise? Did senators or congressmen get a raise? Let me just pause that real quick. I don't know, but I'm beginning to be reminded of something. But let me just double check this here. I'm gonna pull this down for 1 second. I'm going to go back up here. Boom. Now I'm going to say, oh, right. Hold on. Let's see here. Chat GDP. Right. Go here to chat GDP. Let me see. Did Congress did members of, oh, I spelled that wrong. I'm sorry. Did members of Congress and the Senate get pay raises under Donald Trump? Hold on. Pay raises when Donald Trump was president. Okay, check this out. Pay raises. This is interesting. They didn't get a pay raise under Donald Trump. Let me let this play. Oh, can you hear it? Okay, it's not going to.
During Donald Trump's presidency, 2017 to 2021, members of Congress and the Senate did not receive any pay raises. Congressional salaries have been effectively frozen since 2009 due to various legislative actions and provisions within annual appropriations bills that prohibit cost of living adjustments, COLAs. While there were discussions and proposals related to congressional pay, no legislation was enacted that resulted in a pay increase for members of Congress during Trump's term.
Okay, so this has been frozen for senators, congressional members, has been frozen since 2009. All right, now let me see one other thing here. Let me see what else. Okay, let me see. Has the office of the president, or no, when was the last time a president received a raise in annual income? Oh, no. I will just say this. Okay, that was 2001. And that was under Bush. Let's see here. What? Okay, so let me just read it. Okay, it says here the last time a U.S. president received a raise was in 2001. The salary for the president was increased from 200,000 to 400,000 per year. That was doubled. This raise was enacted by Congress in 1999 and took effect in 2001 during the transition from Bill Clinton to President George Bush. According to the U.S. Constitution, a president's salary cannot be changed during their term, so the raise applied to the incoming president rather than the sitting president. Okay, now let me see here also. Okay, let's just go on. I think that's interesting because so senators, Congress members, it's been frozen since 2009. That was the last time they got a raise, and from 2001 was the last time that the executive officer, which would be the president, got a raise. Okay, so I just want to make sure I get those facts straight. Anyway, that doesn't change my opinion about making an argument that the U.S. government pays too much to its employees. There's nowhere in the private sector these people get paid that much. Well, the executives, look at how much the executives are getting paid, you know, in the private sector. I mean, the executives are getting paid. Look, let's take Amazon. Matter of fact, let's take Amazon. Look, how much do the CEOs of Amazon get paid? Okay, this is acting up today. Okay, let's see here. The compensation for CEOs of Amazon, both current and former, is typical structured with a combination of base salary, bonuses, and stock options. Andy Jassy, current CEO, base salary. Andy Jassy base salary was $175,000. Total compensation for 2021, his total compensation was recorded to be approximately $212 million, which includes stock awards that vest over several years. Jeff Bezos, former CEO and founder, base salary. Jeff Bezos' base salary is 800. Okay, that's $1,000. Total compensation for his annual compensation, 1.7 million, including other compensation, primarily for security. Okay, so that's a whole lot of money. $212 million. That's total compensation. But $212 million as of 2023. Okay. But let me see here. Okay. How much does the average Amazon employee get paid? What about Target, Walmart? Okay, it's gathering information, so it's going to take a second. Yeah, let's just see what it comes up. $15 to $18 an hour. Look at this shit. Look at this, man. What major city can you live in? Can you live in New York with this salary? Can you raise a family on this salary? Can you raise one child on this salary in a major city? No. Washington, D.C., you need at least $60,000 for one person if you want to, have a secure life. A secure life. You know how much the rent is in DC? The rent in DC for a 2-bedroom apartment is between, I believe, $3,000 and $6,000 a month. When did that happen? You see, you can't pay that on this salary. You can't pay that on this salary. Okay, software engineers get $100,000 to 120, but look, let's be honest. What's that really today? What is that really today? That means, okay, you can live in DC with that pay, right? You could live in DC with this pay, right? A decent life, one person, a decent life. That's great. You can have a home. You can, you can find ways. You can do something with this, but this is still not that great, but it's way better than this. How you going to pay for health insurance with this? How you going to have retirement with this? A pension. How are you going to, pay rent with this? Okay, let's see here. How much do the executives in Walmart get paid get paid. Let me just say it like that. Then the breakdown will come back on its own. These are private corporations in America. Meanwhile, Project 2025 is arguing that the private sector can't pay. It can't pay with the government. The government's paying its employees too much. It should come down to where the private sector is. I don't think so. What you want? People getting paid $20 an hour? They don't want the government working. The compensation. Okay, let me see if this plays back now. The audio works. I hope so. No. Okay, the audio's not working. So, all right, let's see here. Compensation for Walmart executives includes a combination of base salary, bonuses, stock awards, and other incentives. Here are some details in 2023. Doug McMillon, president and CEO. Doug McMillon's base salary is around $1.3 million a year. His total compensation includes bonuses, stock awards, and other benefits was approximately $22.6 million in 2022. That's for his years, which if it's at 1.3 million a year, then that's, you could see that's under 20 years. He got 22 million. Other key executives: Judith McKenna, president and CEO of Walmart International, base salary, $1 million a year. Total compensation so far, $15.4 million. That's 15 years. It sounds like, I don't know, but if I were to estimate the base salary, right, versus the total compensation. Okay. John Furner, president and CEO of Walmart USA, $1 million. Base salary, that's annually. Total compensation, $14 million so far. Listen, okay, now this is Walmart, right? I'm looking at Walmart right now. How much does the average Walmart employee make? Earn. Right, there we go. We're just reading the 2025 project, the suggestion. They're making it's like they're saying that the government pays employees too much. And their argument is that where is that heard of in the private sector in America? The private sector ain't paying shit in America. Project 2025. What the fuck are you talking about? Excuse my language. What are you talking about? What? No pension, no nothing. You look at this, man. Look at this. Hourly store employees, cashiers, stockers, and sales associates. The average hourly wage for these positions is typically between 12 and 17 per hour. That translates to an annual salary of approximately $24,000, $35,000 assuming full-time employment. Department managers, these employees can earn up to between 14 and 24 per hour, translating to an annual salary of $29.49. Man, I couldn't live on this shit, even in a place where there's rent control. What the fuck? Yo, specialized roles, pharmacy technicians, the average hourly wage. There's no way you can get a pension with this wage. There's no way you could pay for healthcare. You can pay for anything. This is crazy. Can you pay rent? Pharmacy technicians, the average hourly wage is around $15 to $21 per hour, which equates to an annual salary of $31. You can't live in a major city like this. Auto care center technicians, these employees typically earn between 12 and 20 per hour. Salary store management, okay, 50 to 60. Okay, now you're getting in the realm of survival in a major city. I mean, okay survival. Okay, you ain't living it up. No. But your needs are being taken care of. You might have a pension with this. You might have a car with this. You might have a home with this. Especially if you're married, two people got that going on, or two partners, right? Somehow, maybe not married, but just two people. Store managers, the annual salary for store managers can range from $90,000 to over $150,000, depending on. Yeah, okay. Well, in any case, let's go back to Project 2025 and their complaints about the government paying its employees too much. Yeah, here we go. Reading. Damn, what did they used to say about reading? Yeah, it's necessary.
Employees, which, counting disbursements for the unfunded liability, accounted for 51.3% of the federal government's total payroll. The retirement system that replaced it, the Federal Employees Retirement System, FERS, reduced the cost of federal employee retirement disbursements to 28.5% of payroll, including contributions to Social Security and the employer match to the Thrift Savings Plan. More of the pension cost was shifted to the employee, but the new system was much more equitable for the 40% who received few or no benefits under the old system. By 1999, more than half of the federal workforce was covered by the new system, and the government's per capita share of the cost, as the employer, was less than half the cost of the old system, 20.2% of FERS payroll versus 44.3% of CSRS payroll, representing one of the largest examples of government savings anywhere. Although the government pension system has become more like private pension systems, it still remains much more generous, and other means might be considered in the future to move it even closer to private plans. GSA, Landlord and Contractor Management. The General Services Administration is best known as the federal government's landlord, designing, constructing, managing, and preserving government buildings and leasing. And 77. Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Managing outside commercial real estate contracting with 376.9 million square feet of space. Obviously, as its prime function, real estate expertise is key to the GSA's success. However, the GSA is also the government's purchasing agent, connecting federal purchasers with commercial products and services in the private sector and their personnel management functions. With contractors performing so many functions today, the GSA.
Oh my God. Are they going to complain about private sector not being able to buy government buildings or manage government buildings? Is that what they're about to complain about? Did you hear there was a big scandal in DC where Donald Trump, when he became president, bought the old Post House Pavilion? And that's the old Post House Pavilion. And some scandalous stuff went down in that pavilion, but I believe he's being sued. Let me look up this. Donald Trump, old Post House Pavilion, Washington, D.C. Let me see something here. Right. Trump Hotel conflicts of interest with Washington D.C. The story of Trump and the old office pavilion, the tale of grand ambition, outside promises, complex. Okay, so let me see here. Let me go back over to. I can't even believe they even writing about this. Like, damn, they just went to real estate. Um, uh, what, what scandals came out of Donald Trump owning the old post house pavilion? Oops, did I spell it wrong? Pavilion in Washington, D.C. Did I spell pavilion right? Okay, oops, I spelled it with an O. Question mark. Here we go. Look at this. Check this out. I mean, this is reading like a damn scam. So you mean to tell me Donald Trump, they want Donald Trump to become president again. And while he's president, to buy more buildings, government buildings, state buildings. I wonder if they're even going to bother to mention what type of real estate, government real estate. Is it federal government real estate? Is it state government real estate he's talking about? The Post House Pavilion is a state government, um, was owned by the Washington, D.C., because it was the old Post House Pavilion. Was that federal government? Actually, I'm not sure if it's the federal government or the DC government, but there might be some laws that overlap there in terms of how it's managed. But here, in any case, let me see if this plays back. This is some real estate scandal. Now, keep in mind, Project 2025 that's a plan if Donald Trump or the next Republican gets into office. This is what they're recommending, something about real estate. So I just pivoted to just see, like, are they talking about something like this? Because there was a big scandal with that already. You can't be the president buying property. But now that that happened, um, sounds to me like a prelude to more similar acts. But let's see here. Okay, let me just do this one more time. See what happens. Can it play now? No. Okay, so I'm going to read it. All right, here we go. Donald Trump's ownership of the old Post House Pavilion in Washington, D.C., which he redeveloped into a Trump International Hotel, was associated with several controversies and scandals during his presidency. Here are the main issues: conflict of interest, emoluments clause. Critics argued that Trump's continued ownership of the hotel violated the emoluments clause of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits the president from receiving payments from foreign governments without congressional consent. Let me just make sure the audio is on. Okay. Uh, the hotel was patronized by foreign diplomats, raising concerns that they might be trying to curry favor with the administration by staying there. Domestic emoluments. Similar concerns were raised about the domestic emoluments as state and federal officials also patronized the hotel. Lease agreement. Another scandal. Generals, now keep in mind, they did say leasing in the Project 2025 and management. This is, look, oversight and management. Check this out. General Services Administration's GSA lease. The old post house office building is owned by the federal government and leased to the Trump organization. The GSA lease included a clause that prohibited any elected official from benefiting from the lease, which Trump was accused of violating upon becoming president. Oversight and management. There were allegations that the GSA showed leniency towards the Trump organization in its oversight of the lease. Political patronage. Republican events. The hotel became a popular venue for the Republican events and gatherings, raising concerns about their intertwining of government and Trump's private business interests. Lobbying and influence. The hotel was frequented by lobbyists and political figures, leading to allegations that it served as a venue for buying influence with the Trump administration. Financial disclosures and revenue reports. Reports and lawsuits suggested that the Trump organization did not fully disclose the financial benefits derived from the hotel. There were also questions about the accuracy of the reported venues and profits. Ethics and transparency. Lack of divestiture. Trump's decision not to fully divest from his businesses, including the hotel, led to an ongoing ethical concerns and accusations of profiteering from his presidency. Public perception. The high profile nature of the hotel and its association with Trump's brand made it a focal point for broader concerns about transparency and ethics in his administration. These controversies resulted in multiple lawsuits, including suits brought by the state attorney general and watchdog groups. The ongoing public debate about the appropriateness of the sitting president owning and profiteering from a high-profile property in the nation's capital. Now let's go back to Project 2025.
GSA therefore becomes a de facto part of government-wide personnel management. The GSA also manages the Presidential Transition Act, PTA, process, which also directly involves the OPM. A recent proposal would have incorporated the OPM and GSA, and OMB. Fortunately, this did not take place in that form, but it would make sense for GSA and OPM leadership and staff to hold regular meetings to work through matters of common interest such as moderating PTA personnel restrictions and the relationships between contract and civil service employees. Reductions in force. Reducing the number of federal employees seems an obvious way to reduce the overall expense of the...
Yo, this is a damn hustle they trying to run. This is ridiculous. This is clearly something Trump, he's taking personal beef with all the lawsuits of him creating that hotel out of a federal building and all the ethics violations, loss and concerns, lawsuits that came from that. And he wrote this into Project 2025. Y'all folks, y'all better wake the hell up. Y'all better wake the hell up. Like, really, this is pure self-interest. Self-interest paired with racism and gender bias, essentially. Discrimination of different forms. Class discrimination also. They discuss class. They discuss private industry pay. Like folks ain't been complaining about Walmart forever. The CEOs making loads of money while the employees can't even make a livable wage. And they saying that the government should pay people less. This is a move to take over the government, y'all, to reduce pay for government employees when you should be raising pay for private employees. But they did the opposite argument, like the government's getting paid too much. Where in the private industry do they get this kind of money? They don't get this money nowhere in the private industry. Yeah, we know, because you only pay Walmart employees nothing. Barely any pension, barely any security. Some of these people working 10, 15 years, 20 years maybe. Come out of there making the bare minimum, nothing. Yo, people better wake up to this. I'm going to let this part play out. Then I'm going to close down shop and come back tomorrow and continue with this. But pay attention. I also put it in the chat. You can download Project 2025, but I'm going to let it play out, this chapter.
Of the civil service, and many prior administrations have attempted to do just this. Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama began their terms, as did Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, by mandating a freeze on the hiring of new federal employees, but these efforts did not lead to permanent and substantive reductions in the number of non-defense federal employees. First, it is a challenge even to know which workers to cut. As mentioned, there are 2 million federal employees, but since budgets have exploded, so has the total number of personnel, with nearly 10 times more federal contractors than federal employees. Contractors are less expensive because they are not entitled to high government pensions or benefits and are easier to fire and discipline. In addition, millions of state government employees work under federal grants, in effect administering federal programs. These cannot be cut directly. Cutting federal employment can be helpful and can provide a simple story to average citizens, but cutting functions, levels, funds, and grants is much more important than setting simple employment size. Simply reducing numbers can actually increase costs. OMB instructions following President Trump's employment freeze told agencies to consider buyout programs, encouraging early retirements in order to shift costs from current budgets in agencies to the retirement system and minimize the number of personnel hired.
They got the nerve. You see what that is? Instead of fully compensating people, they want to buy you out, which means less. You see what I mean? Less than what you would get somehow. Let me see this again. Simply reducing numbers can actually increase costs. OMB instructions following the President Trump's employment freeze told agencies to consider buyout programs, encouraging early retirements in order to shift costs from current budgets and agencies to retirement systems and minimize the number of personnel fired. Right. But what are you asking the employee to compromise in the buyout, right? Obviously, it's less. So, freeze total agencies consider buyout programs encouraging early retirement. So, in other words, you're forcing people to take early retirement. What is early retirement? Less benefits, less security. And you're talking about people that work for years already. And what's the difference between early retirement and full retirement? Well, in a lot of cases, I don't know the exact data, but I would guess in the federal government or in a in a decent job, a fair job, a unionized job, which we know the US don't have a lot of in the private sector. I'm guessing that would be anywhere from that would be about 6 years difference in employee, 5 to 6 years, maybe something like that. Early retirement, maybe 7 years in some cases. All right, so let me just continue to let it play.
Hired. The Environmental Protection Agency immediately implemented such a program, and OMB urged the passage of legislation to increase payout maximums from $25,000 to $40,000 to further increase spending under the cuts. President Clinton's OMB had introduced a similar buyout that cost the Treasury $2.8 billion, mostly for those who were going to retire anyway. Moreover, when a new employee is hired to fill a job recently vacated in a buyout, the government for a time is paying 2 people to fill one job. 78. Central personnel agencies, managing the bureaucracy. What is needed at the beginning is a freeze on all top career position hiring to prevent burrowing in by outgoing political appointees. Moreover, 4 factors determine the order in which employees are protected during layoffs: tenure, veterans' preference, seniority, and performance in that order of importance. Despite several attempts in the House of Representatives during the Trump years to enact legislation that would modestly increase the weight given to performance over time of service, the fierce opposition by federal managers associations and unions representing long-serving but not necessarily well-performing constituents explains why the bills failed to advance. A determined president.
But not necessarily well-performing constituents? Yo, I'm sorry, but not necessarily doesn't mean anything. You haven't made a finding that they're not. What the? They haven't even made a finding. Look at this. The fierce opposition by federal managers, associations, and unions, thank God, representing long serving but not necessarily well performing constituents. They talking about the employees representing the worker, not necessarily well performing constituents. What the hell does not necessarily mean? Were they performing bad, or were they performing good? Were they living up to the standard of performance, or were they living under that standard? And he's talking about not necessarily. Listen, you have to read and understand the slyness in this. Fierce opposition by federal managers, associations, and unions representing long-serving but not necessarily well-performing constituents. Listen, when you make a plan to change something that affects somebody's life, you need to know if they're well-performing or not. Absolutely. That's exactly the first thing you should know before you do a damn thing. Yo, and they just in here, not necessarily. Good enough for you is not necessarily good enough for you. Yo, what the hell? I have to let this play. I'm sorry.
President should insist that performance be first and be wary of costly types of reductions in force. Impenetrable bureaucracy. The GAO has identified almost 100 actions that the executive branch or Congress could take to improve efficiency and effectiveness across 37 areas that span a broad range of government missions and functions. It identified 33 actions to address mission fragmentation, overlap, and duplication in the 12 areas of defense, economic development, health, homeland security, and information technology. It also identified 59 other opportunities for executive agencies or Congress to reduce the cost of government operations or enhance revenue collection across 25 areas of government. Point 20. A logical place to begin would be to identify and eliminate functions and programs that are duplicated across cabinet departments or spread across multiple agencies. Congress hoped to help this effort by passing the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993-21, which required all federal agencies to define their missions, establish goals and objectives, and measure and report their performance to Congress. 3 decades of endless time-consuming reports later, the government continues to grow, but with more paper and little change either in performance or in the number of levels between government and the people. The Brookings Institution's Paul Light emphasizes the importance of the increasing number of levels between the top heads of departments and the people at the bottom who receive the products of government decision-making. He estimates that there are perhaps 50 or more levels of impenetrable bureaucracy and no way other than imperfect performance appraisals to communicate between them. Point 22. The Trump administration proposed some possible consolidations, but these were not received favorably in Congress, whose approval is necessary for most such proposals. The best solution is to cut functions and budgets and devolve responsibilities. That is a challenge primarily for presidents, Congress, and the entire government.
Okay. Devolve. Let me just make sure. I want to make sure I could transfer or delegate power. Pass into. Okay, devolve, but are they using the right word? Because devolve means lesser, and it sounds to me like if it's not Congress that can do something or the Senate, then what's less than that? There's nothing less than that. There's just the people voting for them. So I don't get that statement. Are they saying devolve meaning upward? Let's listen. 1 second. Where are we at?
Government, but the
Okay, let's go back up a little.
The OPM still needs to lead the way government-wide in managing personnel. Managing personnel properly, even in any The Brookings Institution's Paul Light emphasizes the importance of the increasing number of levels between the top heads of departments and the people at the bottom who receive the products of government decision-making. He estimates that there are perhaps 50 or more levels of impenetrable bureaucracy and no way other than imperfect performance appraisals to communicate between them. Point 22. The Trump administration proposed some possible consolidations, but these were not received favorably in Congress, whose approval is necessary for most such proposals. The best solution is to cut functions and budgets and devolve responsibilities. That is a challenge primarily for presidents, Congress, and the entire government, but the OPM still needs to lead the way government-wide in managing personnel properly even in any future smaller government.
This sounds like they're proposing something without a real solution, instead of demanding like a president, push for something openly that you want done. Explain it to folks openly. Make your case to the public openly. But to devolve, sounds to me like there's some slight misunderstanding there. But I'm playing.
Government. Creating a responsible career management service. The people elect a president who is charged by Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution 23 with seeing that the laws are faithful.
Oh, well, there you have it. They're saying devolve, but actually, usually devolved means downward responsibility. You delegate responsibility downward. But in this case, it sounds like he's saying, no, devolve, but give it upward to the executive branch. Forget Congress, forget the Senate, and forget the government agency that's supposed to do it. Just bring it up to the executive branch. The Congress shouldn't have anything to do with this.
Faithfully executed with his political appointees democratically linked to that legitimizing responsibility. An autonomous bureaucracy has neither. 79. Mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. Independent constitutional status nor separate moral legitimacy. Therefore, career civil servants by themselves should not lead major policy changes and reforms. The creation of the Senior Executive Service was the top career change introduced by the 1978 Carter-Campbell Civil Service Reform Act. Its aim was to professionalize the career service and make it more responsible to the democratically elected commander-in-chief and his political appointees while respecting the rights due to career employees, very much including those in the top positions. The new SES would allow management to be more flexible in filling and reassigning executive positions and locations beyond narrow specialties for more efficient mission accomplishment and would provide pay and large bonuses to motivate career performance. The desire to infiltrate political appointees improperly into the high career civil service has been widespread in every administration, whether Democrat or Republican. Democratic administrations, however, are typically more successful because they require the cooperation of careerists, who generally lean heavily to the left. Such burrowing in requires career job descriptions for new positions that closely mirror the functions of a political appointee, a special hiring authority that allows the bypassing of veterans' preference as well as other preference categories, and the ability to frustrate career candidates from taking the desired position.
Yeah, they are using, this is the same tactic they use on minorities. Put one minority against another minority politically. And here they're like, use the idea of the veterans to, say that the government should lower wages. They want to gut the damn government. For real, they want to gut regulations in the government for employees. This is full of manipulation. Actually it's also poorly written. Because it just goes, I don't know if it's intended, chapter by chapter, there's different chapters, but how the hell are you going to involve yourself in real estate? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't get it. Why was it necessary for them to put something in there about real estate, how it's managed, government real estate, and blah, blah. Sound highly suspicious because Donald Trump's claim to fame is real estate tycoon. He's gone into debt, bankruptcy 6 times. while being a real estate tycoon? You want to let him anywhere have any say over any government building management or whatsoever? Yo, folks, and now they down back to employee pay, how to deal with employees. You know, making some really crazy comparisons to the private industry. Like the answer is reduce employees' benefits, pay, and all of this stuff. And they're saying, look, you don't get that in the private sector. Why are you getting it in government? Well, the private sector ain't paying employees shit.
Position. President Reagan's OPM began by limiting such SES burrowing in, arguing that the proper course was to create and fill political positions. This simultaneously promotes the CSRA principle of political leadership of the bureaucracy and respects the professional autonomy of the career service. But this requires that career SES employees should respect political rights too. Actions such as career staff reserving excessive numbers of key policy positions as career reserve to deny them to non-career SES employees frustrate CSRA intent. Another evasion is the general domination by career staff on SES personnel evaluation boards, the opposite of non-career executives dominating these critical meeting discussions as expected in the SES. Career training also often underplays the political role in leadership and inculcates career-first policy and value viewpoints. Frustrated with these activities by top career executives, the Trump administration issued Executive Order 139/5724 to make career professionals in positions that are not normally subject to change as a result of a presidential transition but who discharge significant duties and exercise significant discretion in formulating and implementing executive branch policy and programs an exception to the competitive hiring rules and examinations for career positions under a new Schedule F.
Takeover of the government, more executive branch control. That's what this is. And when you say executive branch, keep in mind who the executive is, because that executive basically wants to destroy government from the inside. They're literally arguing that government employees, like a lot of people are getting paid too much. And their comparison is that look at the private industry. There's nowhere in the private industry where people get paid this much. Yeah, because Walmart don't pay shit. Their executives get paid millions, but their employees don't barely get even minimum wage. They can't even live in the cities where they work. They can't even, it's like, man, they're not even offering a wage. How are you going to get a pension on a Walmart wage? A lot of, it's like, that's the problem. They don't have regulations. The private sector doesn't have regulations as it is in terms of how they treat their employees. And they're arguing that the government pays too well, gives too many benefits. This is an attack on government right here. So his way of dealing with problems is give the executive branch more power. We'll deal with it. We'll circumvent Congress. We'll circumvent the Senate. We'll circumvent the Constitution. That's basically what I get out of this document so far. And we only 80 pages in. Like, this is, folks, you better read this for yourself. And in my view, anybody that has any halfway decent reading comprehension should be outraged by the suggestions being made here. Totally outraged. It's not only going to result in the average person not getting any damn money, getting less money, less wages, and benefits. It's just going to do that only because regular everyday people work in government. What are they talking about? They're acting like the government is a bunch of aristocrats getting paid millions of dollars every guy. Do you know $60,000, to live in an urban city? That's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money to live in Washington, D.C., New York City, Los Angeles, or California, I'm sorry. Um, you know, that's not a lot of money. Chicago, that's not a lot of money, you know. And they're talking about that kind of salary like that's a great, like you living it up high on the horse. How you going to pay for any expenses, healthcare, insurance, life insurance, pension, and a home to live in, rent? Rent in DC is for a 2-bedroom apartment is between $3,000 and $6,000 a month. You can't pay that making $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year. You can't. Come on. What are they? What? This is an attack, y'all. I'm just saying, this is a serious attack, and they're spelling it out. And if you cannot read and comprehend, they are going to dupe you. Don't listen to the America, 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 because a lot of these people ain't even been in the country that long, and they're citizens. I mean, really, I'm just saying, when you think about it, Sean Hannity, he's pushing for this shit. He's only a second generation American. Right wing is a mother. Not supporting the average person's wage. He's not only a right winger, he's a classist. That's what that is going on. And that's what this is right here. This is classist, racist. This is fascist. And we only into 80, page 80. They want to gut your wages. They want to make more of a gap between the wealthy and the middle class and the poor. More.
It ordered the director of OPM and agency heads to set procedures to prepare lists of such confidential, policy determining, policy making, or policy advocating positions and prepare procedures to create exceptions from civil service rules when careerists hold such positions, from which they can relocate back to the regular civil service after such service. The order was subsequently reversed by President. 80. Central Personnel Agencies, managing the bureaucracy. 81. Biden 25 at the demand of the civil service associations and unions. It should be reinstated. Be reinstated, but SES responsibility should come first. Managing personnel in a union environment. Historically, unions were thought to be incompatible with government management. There is a natural limit to the bargaining power of private sector unions, but the financial bottom line of public sector unions is not similarly constrained. If private sector unions push too hard a bargain, they can so harm a company or so reduce efficiency that their employer is forced to go out of business and eliminate union jobs altogether. There is no such limit in government, which cannot go out of business, so demands can be excessive without negatively affecting employee and union bottom lines. Even Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt considered union representation in the federal government to be incompatible with democracy. Striking and even threats of bargaining and delay were considered acts against the people and thus improper. It was not until President John Kennedy that...
Okay, just for the record, so people understand this, SES means these people report to the president. Just so you know, let me just come out of this. Here we go. Boom. SES was designed to be a core of executives selected for their leadership qualifications. Members of the SES serve in key positions just below the top presidential appointees and are a major link between the appointees and the rest of the federal workforce. So, it seems like a move. I don't know if it's directly to the president, but yeah, it says key positions linked just below the top presidential appointees and are a major link. But okay, but they're making an issue that it should be the SES. I'm gonna look in more into that. But all right, so let me just go back and let the rest play here. Boom, here we go. Let's keep it going.
That union representation in the federal government was recognized and then merely by executive order. Labor bargaining was not set in statute until the Carter administration was forced by Congress to do so in order to pass the CSRA, although all bargaining was placed under OPM review. The CSRA was able to maintain strong management rights for the OPM and agencies and forbade collective bargaining on pay and benefits as well as management prerogatives. Over time, OPM, FLRA, and agencies' personnel offices and courts, especially in Democratic administrations, narrowed management rights so that labor bargaining expanded as management rights contracted. But the management rights are still in statute, have been enforced by some administrations, and should be enforced again by any future OPM and agency managements, which should not be intimidated by union power. Rather than being daunted, President Trump issued 3 executive orders. Executive Order 13,836.
They hate unions. They hate unions. But where you going to get your pension from? Where you going to get your fair wage? A living wage. Not just a survival wage, a living wage. Where's the average worker? Where's the government employee going to get that from? Where's the private employee going to get that from? This is all about gutting employee wages. Nothing about heightening employee wages in the private sector. No, that exploit employees consistently because there's a lack of union regulations, a lack of union oversight, a lack of unions. No, instead of that, instead of raising the private sector pay, which is, minimum wage in a lot of cases, like Walmart and all of this, they want to lower the government wage to Walmart. So people don't really do their job because the job is not easy that people do in government anyway. It is ridiculous, man.
13,836. Encouraging agencies to renegotiate all union collective bargaining agreements to ensure consistency with the law and respect for management rights. 26. Executive Order 13,837. Encouraging agencies to prevent union representatives from using official time preparing or pursuing grievances or from engaging in other union activity on government time.
What? Yo, this is an attack on workers' rights. This is an attack on workers' rights, y'all. And if you let these MAGA people use the idea that they're working for one minority, if you to attack all, really, you falling for the okie doke. But in any case, I'm gonna let this page play. Let me see, how many more pages is it of this first chapter? Damn, that was 80. Matter of fact, let me just continue.
79.
No.
Mandate
Oops.
for
That was 80. Let me go down. There.
'81. Biden 25 at the demand of the civil service associations and unions. It should be reinstated.
All right. Sorry, y'all. I'm just getting a little bummed out right now. I gotta stop it. I gotta get some rest. But this is a massive gutting of just workers' rights. This is an attack on decent wages. If you're following or promoting Trump or him being the president, you owe yourself to read this. You owe yourself. Read this, and if you don't understand some of the words or the agencies they're mentioning, ask for help. All that information, you can Google anything you don't understand, but this is a clear, so far up to page 81, this is a clear attack on workers' rights. If anybody reads this and accepts this from a billionaire, you are a damn fool. You are a damn fool. Anyway, y'all, I'll be back later on today. Thanks for today. That was page 81, up to page 81 of Project 2025. Yeah, and it's a poor read. I mean, it's getting interesting, but they made some flaw. They make some weird some they make some flaws in this. Number one of the things I could say is that they when they make some arguments early on, not when it gets along later, it gets a little better because mentioning um, they start mentioning agencies at least. But they made some claims early on, like that they had data and polls that they don't even tell you the names of the polls or the data that they're reading, the reports. They just say one report says blah blah blah. It's like no. When you mention a report, you're supposed to mention it by name so other people have a chance to read it to find out if your opinion on it and your reasoning is sound. They do a lot of that, leaving out um, pertinent information in this. And I would say damn any person that is used to writing in a critical manner, doing research reports, writing reports on a college level, on a professional level, would demand more out of the persons that are writing this stuff. That's what I would say. But as it goes along, it becomes a clear push for private industry and fewer worker rights. So far, up to page 81. In a very slick way, they're doing it. So if you're going to be lazy about reading, you're going to fall for the okey doke. You must read this. It's 900 pages, but this is their platform, and you must read it. It's an attack on every single middle class home in America. You see, regardless of what your race is, this is an attack on every middle class. And middle class is people earning $60,000, but because if you're living in a major city, $40,000 ain't gonna cut it. That's not middle class no more. That's working poor. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, folks, I appreciate you. I'll be back with some more. Appreciate it.